Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and proud graduate of Tampa Catholic High School, the one and only Eric Henry. Eric, how are you doing, my man?
Chip Brown, I am doing well. Just counting down the days till football season is upon us, at least the start of the football season. Certainly with fall practice here, it's in full swing for us, those of us who are covering the team. But for those of y'all who are just eagerly waiting, 3 more Saturdays. No, actually, today's the 13th. So 2 more Saturdays.
2 more Saturdays.
And then
all right,
football will be upon us.
We got a lot to get into. Some good, some bad. But the Olympics, Eric, the Olympics are over. Texas won 16 medals. Current and former Texas athletes won 16 medals, including 6 gold medals. 6 gold medals won by Julian Alfred. She was representing St. Lucia. She won the 100 meters. Ryan Krauser won his 3rd straight gold medal in the Olympics in the shot put. Tara Davis Woodhull won the long jump. That was kind of a nice emotional scene with her husband after she won. Kevin Durant now is the only man to have 4 Olympic gold medals. Hubert Koss was representing Hungary, but he won the gold in the 200 backstroke. And Scotty Scheffler, he won gold in men's individual golf. Kind of a little bit of a comeback in that after John Rahm collapsed, had a 4-shot lead and gave it all away. Are you an Olympics guy? Do you watch the Olympics?
Yeah, Chip. I mean, I'm a big summer. I think we have talked about this a little bit, just obviously not here taping the show. Summer Olympics, I mean, track, 100 meter, fastest man in the world, 200 meter. I mean, that's showtime.
Relays, love the relays.
Of course. So that's a big draw.
You can pass the baton correctly.
There you go. Even Winter Olympics. I skip to some of those, what I'll call kind of like out of the box sports, like the luge, and curling and all that stuff that I pay zero attention to outside of the Olympics. And then when the Olympics are on, I am locked in. But you asked me if there was any Longhorn that stood out to me, and I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit and say Kevin Durant. But here's why. It's not just because he's the most, arguably, Scotty Scheffler, arguably the most high-profile name. Chip, I'm curious if you see it the same way I do. The rest of the world is coming when it comes to basketball. I mean, 4 years from now, can we definitively say that the United States is a lock to win a gold when the LeBron, Curry, Durant era moves on? You can't definitively say that. So in my mind, I guess it's part of it, of course, Kevin being the Longhorn, but also just the team accomplishment of, I don't want to sound over dramatic, Chip, but I think this is the last stretch that you can. I mean, look at how much Canada has grown in basketball with the NBA All-Stars they have. And we saw Serbia and Jokic. And this is the last.
Victor Wembanyama.
Can't forget about Big Vic is going to lead France, and he's going to be a monster in 4 years, right? So this, to me, I think it was special because this could be, and I'm not saying the United States won't win or will never win again, but this could be the last time you definitively say, okay, the United States is the favorite in basketball. So that is why I go with Katie, Chip.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 3 established Hall of Famers on that Olympic team in Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and Steph Curry. So, yeah, and I just love that Durant still has that killer assassin mentality when he had to have it in those close games against Serbia and France. He was money. And it's great to see because we know as you get older in sports, that killer instinct, the injuries start to creep in. Maybe you start missing a shot or 2 here or there. Not Kevin Durant. That dude is still an assassin. So, yeah, kudos to all the Longhorns who won medals and especially those gold medals. Good stuff. All right, Eric. Let's give the Texas fans the good news first before we get to the tough news. Here's the good news. Your beers at DKR are only $8. And when you go to the University of Michigan, you're going to pay $12.25 for a domestic beer. So I think back to the day. This is one of the only good things that Steve Patterson did while he was the athletic director at Texas. He mostly ruined the morale and made sort of, well, not great coaching hires, but he did railroad beer sales into DKR. In fact, so much so that school president Bill Powers, God rest his soul, was on board and kind of tried to jam it through. And the chancellor said, no, we need to do a study. We need to do a study of how beer sales affects the climate and the environment of the athletic event. So they had to wait an extra year. But by God, the beer sales obviously are at Texas, and a domestic beer will be $8 for the third straight year, Texas fans. So you got that going for you. They're charging $10 a beer at A&M. All right, there's the good news, I guess, for those of you who don't drink. Sorry. All right. Eric, it's been a tough week. It was we hate to be the bearers of bad news, but we're here to help you process it, okay? So Eric Henry, myself, we've been writing stories about how the Texas Longhorns are going to have to adapt and adjust to the injury news. CJ Baxter, you all know, the leading returning rusher for the Longhorns, out for the season with a torn LCL and a torn PCL in his right knee. It happened during a contact portion of practice a week ago. And then, full disclosure, we're recording on Tuesday, August 13th. Yesterday, we learned that freshman running back Christian Clark left practice with an injury as well, and that tests were being done to determine the severity. As of this moment, we don't have the results of those tests, so we're not going to speculate, but obviously it's a serious enough injury that they were doing further tests, MRI. So, Eric, this is tough news, because if you'd have asked us 10 days ago, I'm willing to bet that you and I both would have said the running back position is one of the top 3 positions on the football team, like your confidence meter. How does this development, the CJ Baxter injury, now, Christian Clark, we've got to wait to see how long he's going to be out, but it's like if you get in a car accident, you're a little hesitant to drive that next time out. I think Texas fans are like, we don't need any more news like this. Thank you. 2 running backs injured in less than a week, Eric.
Chip, before I go on the running backs, let me just quickly take it where you started. Michigan, over 100,000 people are coming to your games. Your beer should not be double digits domestics. Sorry. You're not hurting for cash. You're selling out the big house. That was just a little pet peeve of mine. Come on. 105,000 plus.
I mean, you win the national championship and then you take it out on your fans.
And a domestic beer shouldn't be double digits. I digress. On to important stuff, or at least Longhorn stuff, because that's important for my mind. Nevertheless, confidence level, Chip. I hate to give you the cliche phrase, but injuries are a part of football, right? You hate it when they come kind of in bunches, in a rash with one position. And I think, while I haven't been doing this as long as you, I've done it long enough. I'm sure you can attest. Isn't it weird how that's kind of how it works, right? Like in preseason, it's always weird how they just kind of come in a bunches with one position. I've seen it happen many times. Texas recruits and has recruited the running back position very well. There are power programs in the nation who would kill to have Jaden Blue, Trey Wisner, Jarrett Gibson, just as your three. Full stop. With that being said, there is a measure of concern in my mind that you now have lost starter or co-starter, however you want to categorize CJ Baxter, and then you lost a up-and-coming freshman who, once you lost CJ, moving a spot up on the depth chart, probably going to was in line to play some sort of role. Now you have 3 scholarship running backs. Let's just put this in perspective, right? Last year, CJ Baxter, Jonathan Brooks, Savion Red, Trey Wisner, Keelan Robinson. I did mention Jaden Blue, right? I've always forgotten I ran through those names, but that's just 5 guys alone, scholarship running backs who had carries last year. At some point or time in the season, had carries. So now you know that number is going to be at least 3. And that puts a measure of pressure, whether it be, and I don't want to sound disrespectful, but I'm just going to be real. Like, you didn't think coming into this year that you were going to have to say the name Colin Page as someone who might have to take snaps.
Colin Page, baby.
Right? And
Anderson High School, Trojan man.
And Chip, we've seen it. Tashard Choice coaches Colin Page as hard as he coaches CJ Baxter, right? So like, in that sense, he'll be ready, right? Maybe not talent level, but in that sense, he'll be ready. This is where my mind goes immediately for Texas. Jaden Blue's going to be able to run the football. Jaden Blue's not going to take 280 plus carries. Is Jaden Blue, Chip, going to take 250 plus touches, right? If we even do it in touches, that's a question. How does Trey Wisner respond to now? He's a guy who was looking at, a role, what that role was going to be determined. Now Trey Wisner looking at north of 125, 130, 140 touches this season. How does he respond? And I wrote about this for the site. No one is questioning whether Jaden Blue and Trey Wisner and Jarrett Gibson, of course, not tested, but Jarrett Gibson, are going to be able to run the football. We think that they'll be able to run the football. Blue and Wisner especially. Xavier Worthy led this team last year in receptions, and I always forget the number, whether it's 75 or 70. I know he had 1,014 yards last year, 8 touchdowns. I always forget whether it was 70 or 75. I think it's 75 receptions. The point is, from running backs last year, Chip, you had 75. There you go. 75 for 10, 14, 8 touchdowns. You had 71 receptions combined from all the running backs last year. You had 4 running backs hauling passes. You go back a year prior, Xavier Worthy leads the team with 60 receptions. You had 66 receptions from running backs. Steve Sarkisian will use running backs in the passing game. So, is this a situation where, just in terms of a workload, a trickle-down effect, what does that look like for Jaden Blue? Jaden Blue, a guy who maybe would have had 20-something, let's just use CJ Baxter and Jonathan Brooks' numbers last year. Both of them had like 28 or 26 receptions, somewhere around there, right? Is this a situation where Jaden Blue now has 40 catches, right? We're tacking onto his workload. Trey Wisner steps up. Jarrett Gibson's got to show. Steve Sarkisian has said it's a prerequisite to have hands out of the backfield to play for him. Well, we're going to have to prove it. We're going to have to see it, right? Because in my mind, if those guys, and I'll give it back to you on this, Chip, if let's just say Wisner and Gibson aren't proficient immediately and be able to handle some of the ways that Steve Sarkisian will use the running back, well then Quinn's rapport, and that's the question I asked Steve Sarkisian last night when we had him in Zoom availability, Quinn's rapport and his chemistry with those receivers better be on point, because some of the ways that you would use the ball, you would use the running backs in the passing game and distribute the ball is going to fall to the receivers and fall to Juan Davis and Gunnar Helm and Amari Niblack. So there is a trickle-down effect. Again, it's not complete, hair on fire, but it's not an ideal, it's far from an ideal situation when you lose 2 scholarship backs.
Yeah. I mean, you need to put Jaden Blue and Trey Wisner in bubble wrap the rest of this camp. And I've said Texas is okay with Jaden Blue and Trey Wisner as their 1-2 punch at running back. In my opinion, we'll be talking about Trey Wisner at the end of the season as a star, the way that we were talking about Jaden Blue at the end of last season. I think Trey Wisner is that good. If you go back and watch his film at DeSoto, the guy finishes runs. He's got a nice stiff arm. He's 6 feet 100 or 6 feet 200 pounds, but he reminds me a little bit of Jonathan Brooks. I mean, he's a guy who's got good contact balance. He looks like he's going down, and then all of a sudden he's still alive and breaking off another 20 yards on the run. So I think Trey Wisner is going to be a star. Now, it could be tough early going, could be some growing pains, but I think by the end of the year, Trey Wisner, you're going to be like, oh man, that dude's rock solid. So you just can't take any more hits to that room. You can't, because it starts to, like you said, not only it affects the passing game and all the catches that the running backs have in a Steve Sarkisian offense, but your practice, your ability to practice. And, the thought of a 105 man roster, this is where these kinds of conversations start to come in, if that's where we're moving in 2025. But, they can't take any more hits to that room. They just can't. And here's the thing. It's a call to arms whenever you have an injury to a significant player. It's a call to arms for all the other players on the team to do a little more, to do a little extra, to make sure that player's injury is not in vain, that you're doing everything you can to help lift the team. And this is the worst part of fall camp, Eric. I mean, you're 2 weeks in, but you're not in game week yet. You're sick of it. You're sick of the heat. Sarkisian's been moving the times a little bit to lessen the heat and give them a little bit of preparation for those night games later in September. Going inside after a certain amount of time in practice to get them out of the heat. But this is a challenge. This is a big challenge to this entire roster. And I don't think it's panic time. I'm with you. It's not panic time. Just can't take any more hits to that room. Because it will affect the way you practice. And kudos to Colin Page, the walk-on from Austin, who had a really big first fall camp scrimmage, made some plays. And, it's interesting. Kai Woods made some plays as a walk-on for Texas, and he got a scholarship to Nevada with Jeff Choate. So, hey, put that stuff on film. You never know. Colin Page. So, Eric, let's get into this first fall camp scrimmage. The defense, I'll admit, I was a little surprised, calling sources, and all of a sudden I'm hearing defense. Defense was shutting down the run. Defense was getting pressure on the quarterback. Didn't matter if it was the first team offense against the second team defense or the second team offense against the first team defense. The defense ruled the day. It was Anthony Hill making plays, and then it was Lianga Lafau making plays at the middle linebacker position. Lianga Lafau with a couple pass breakups. We know Jeff Choate called him an elite pass dropper. And real quickly on that, Steve Sarkisian, when I asked about Lianga Lafau yesterday, he said he's starting to cut it loose. That is such a big deal for a middle linebacker. That was what they were saying about Jalen Ford. We're trying to get him to cut it loose. And he finally did in year 3. Lianga Lafau's in year 2. And he's starting to be confident enough that he's trusting his instincts and making plays on the football. that's going to serve him well because they need him to play a lot. They can't have another year where Jalen Ford played some 800 something ungodly snaps last year. He was dead tired in the OU game. That can never happen again. But, you had Jahdae Barron forcing a fumble. You had Andrew Makuba with an interception, Jelani McDonald with an interception. So you had every layer of, because Jahdae Barron was playing corner and Jalen Gilbo was playing nickel. You had every layer of the defense doing well. And I was told specifically the safeties look connected. They look connected. And that is such a big deal, Eric, because they did not look connected last year. And I've said, if this group doesn't look connected this year, it's coaching. So, your thoughts on, and we'll get to some of the good things that happen on offense, but it was the defense's day.
Chip, I don't want to throw cold water. I don't want to throw a wet blanket on what you talk about there with the defense, because it is huge considering the amount of playmakers they're replacing on defense. T. Sweat, Murph, Jalen, Ryan Watts, the list goes on. It feels like, again, I hate to just be like, kind of like grumpy old man here, but
go ahead, be grumpy.
The more you do this, especially in the early parts of spring camp or fall camp, it was the same thing last year, Chip. Remember that it was the defense seemingly getting the better of the offense, right? Offense, this isn't an excuse, but offense, in my opinion, perspective, it takes a little time to get going, especially the more new guys you're working in. In this case, obviously not a new quarterback, not a new offensive line, but you're working some new skill position guys. And we all already talked about what's going on at running back, right? So again, I'm not trying to poo-poo on what the defense did. Andrew Makuba coming in making plays. You want to hear that. Jahdae Barron, you know what he brings, but it's great to hear that. Leonga Lafau, like you talked about, something that we can have a really meaty, substantive conversation in my mind. I know we kind of alluded to it. I can't remember if it was last week or the week prior, but that the linebacker competition, I don't think that ends come fall. This could be an exact situation like last year where Leonga Lafau, like Anthony Hill, begins the year as a situational player, and then steadily through practice, through games, it's like he's ready. We are ready to make him a full-time player. And the thing is, that gives you a measure of versatility if you're PK, because let's just say Leonga Lafau's like, hey, we think his spot is middle, and he's doing all the things that's asked of him as a Mike linebacker. All right, then you know what you have in Anthony Hill as an off-ball linebacker, as a pass rusher, as an edge guy. You just slide him back. Or maybe A. Hill is just balling out, right? He's not having the Harold Perkins adjustment to playing Mike linebacker. He's proved us wrong.
Or he doesn't have the Harold Perkins defensive line that LSU had last year.
That is true. That is true. I shouldn't say proved us wrong. He's proved PK wrong, right? In the sense that not only is he a good football player, but he's a damn good linebacker too, right? He works his way up. But Lafau is having such a great year in practice and developing. And you talked about his ability in coverage, that he can play off ball, right? To me, it's a win-win there. And that's a scenario that I think you can keep your eye on throughout the season. Chip, you can tell me if I'm off in that assessment. But in terms of this specific scrimmage, again, great that you hear the defensive guys, making plays. To me, that was more of an expectation based on talent. Was never the issue with this defense. It was putting it together and making plays, making splash plays, getting to the quarterback, sacks, producing more turnovers. They did produce more turnovers in 23 than they did in 22 and in 21, but you still want more, right? So doing those things are good. But I do take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, just because offense I have never I'm racking my brain, Chip. And again, if you see it differently, call me on it. But I am hard pressed to think of a time that in these scrimmages, it's always like, man, the offense truly got the better. That stuff always takes time, especially with an offensive coach like Sarkisian. It takes time to get that running on full cylinders, in my perspective.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I'd heard that the Tuesday practice, the very same practice last week where CJ Baxter went down, the passing game had been tearing it up. There were big play passes from Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning to Silas Bolden, Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore, Jonte Cook, and so and like big pass plays. Now, sometimes one side of the ball gets whipped and they get a little fed up and they show up. And so I'm with you. Don't overcook it. Don't make sweeping conclusions about this Texas football team based on the first fall camp scrimmage. Wait until the season starts and we see what these guys are doing under the lights when it matters. So, but I thought it was good to hear that, okay, so Jahdae Barron knocks the ball loose in a really good one-on-one play in space against Jarek Gibson, causes a fumble. Christian Clark also had a fumble in the fall camp scrimmage, and they both got sent to timeout basically. And Colin Page got a bunch of the work in the scrimmage. So look, that's what fall camp is about. It's about sending messages, it's about setting work ethic and tone and standards. So, but I'm not going to lie. I think it was good to hear that up front, Alfred Collins was getting push right up the middle. And yeah, second team offensive line. Okay. Still, I think Texas's second team offensive line is still pretty good. And so you're taking that. Justice Finkley had a sack and Anthony Hill was all over the place. So Ethan Burke, Barron Sorrell, told Barron Sorrell was just, fantastic in the scrimmage. Okay. You expect that. You expect those guys to be that good. But, for them to be able to bottle up the running game, and Jaden Blue and Trey Wisner did play some in this scrimmage. They made their best plays in the passing game. So no surprise there either. But my biggest takeaways, Eric, were really Lianga Lafau making some plays, the 2 pass breakups and fitting the run nicely. Is a big deal. And Tyanthony Smith. I got multiple people saying this guy's energy, the way he plays, he's going to be in the 2D by the end of the year. He's the future. So Tyanthony Smith, who came in weighing 197 pounds and is now up to 220. We'll see if he can hold that weight in this heat. But Tyanthony Smith is a guy, 220, who loves football, plays with great energy, plays with great passion. That was a huge pickup, it appears, by Texas late in the recruiting process. So those were my big takeaways, Eric, on the defensive side. How about you?
No, I will agree with you that I was shaking my head when you mentioned AC and the guys up front, right? Because that's what you want to hear, right? That I will say, it doesn't matter what time of year, you want to hear your defensive line making those types of strides. Tyanthony Smith is an interesting one, because it was not the first time we heard his name, right? Steve Sarkisian talking about a little bit. David Benda, I'm forgetting the nickname he labeled him with. Was it Hurricane? Hurricane, right? Which is a hell of a nickname. You got to love that, right? Especially for a freshman. Indicative that he's running around, flying out there making plays. But what gave me pause initially was his weight, right? You talked about him coming in at $195, $197. All of a sudden he's up to 220, as you said. We'll see how he carries that throughout his freshman year. But those are the types of guys, and maybe I have seen, way too many of them from my time in South Florida, right? South Florida is a haven for, 6'1", 195-pound linebackers who play with their hair on fire, and then they all of a sudden balloon up to 225, 230, and then they're making plays at the collegiate level. But I guess my instinct with Tyanthony Smith was, okay, maybe it's going to take him a little bit of time to truly kind of be in here. A guy's going to make an impact, right? But it's great to hear his name. I saw in rundown Alex January, right? Another guy making plays as well on the defensive line. So those things in my mind are tangible that you can carry over into the next next fall scrimmage, and ideally into the season. So those things do matter, no doubt about it, Chip. And
Yeah.
also, and really quick, you also noted, again, if you haven't read it, go check it out on the site. You talked about Bill Norton and Jermaine Lole doing their job in run defense and filling gaps. That's also encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting. Aaron Bryant and Alex January were the starting defensive tackles for the second team defense in this scrimmage. And then it became a big old mix and match. And Eric, the mix and match is all the time. They're trying to get looks at everybody. So don't be like, oh my God, Bryant and January, what? Running second? No, I mean, they're being rewarded for doing good, hard work. But Bill Norton and Jermaine Lole and Tia Savea are going to play key roles on this defense. And one interesting point that came up from a source who I trust said, look, T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy were out of this world, but the depth behind them was a little bit of a concern, especially after Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton. The sense is Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton may not be all world, but they're really good. And the guys behind them are really good. And the guys behind them are really good. So the sense is that maybe there's not, a drop off, that these guys can stay fresh, get the job done, and feed off each other. And you have more guys turning in good work. We'll see. Time will tell. But I do like the size that they have. And it does appear that Bill Norton and Tia Savea are rotating in together. They played together at Arizona. I don't know how long that lasts. I don't know if that's a thing. Johnny Nansen, a big part of the turnaround for the Arizona run defense last year, had Bill Norton and Tia Savea on the field together. So there's a comfort level there. We'll see. But I do think, Eric, and we'll move over to the offense now because, obviously if there are interceptions, the quarterback might have had a tough day. I think Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning both connected on a lot of passes. I'm told Isaiah Bond had a good day. Ryan Wingo again, Silas Bolden, Jonte Cook, and Juan Davis. Juan Davis with a touchdown on a seam route. So watch out, because we heard Steve Sarkisian say point blank, Juan Davis is going to be in this rotation. He's earned it. And we heard Jeff Banks say Juan Davis will knock the crap out of somebody coming through the A gap. So kudos to Juan Davis, who's waited his turn. A senior, came in with JT Sanders and Gunnar Helm. Gunnar Helm he's the man, but Juan Davis, Amari Niblack, maybe you're rotating. Jordan Washington continues to get praise. I keep thinking this kid's going to be a factor sooner rather than later. Steve Sarkisian said, I love the tight end room. So that room looks stocked. The offensive line had a tough day, but there was some, completed passes. And as I said, there were a big play by Jaden Blue in the passing game and a screen pass to Trey Wisner that broke, not for scores, but for big gains. So I get the feeling the passing game, Eric, is in pretty good shape maybe better than we think in terms of both quarterbacks, Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning, with that chemistry with a virtual group of newcomers. What do you think?
Third year returning quarterback, starting quarterback, second year returning quarterback. I absolutely felt like this past game would be in great shape. Chip, people have kind of looked at me, and I've had to kind of explain why I've felt this way. People looked at me with, kind of confused eyes when I said that I felt that this year's group could be better than last year's group. And yeah, you're talking about 3 guys who were drafted, which shout out to Jordan Whittington. I used to see him making plays week 1 of preseason camp, right? He looks like
the Rams.
Looks like the 10-year NFL vet that Steve Sarkisian said he would be. But the reason why I believed that this group would be better, and I'm just going to start with the receivers first, positionless football. This is the way Steve did it at Alabama. When you can take a Jalen Waddle or a Devontae Smith or whoever it may be, right? Jerry Jeudy, et cetera, and move guys around. I mean, that's something that even Steve talked about. I believe it was 2 pressers ago. The last time we got him in person, he talked about the fact that he has in his mind 5 guys, and Ryan Wingo was the guy who's kind of speculating as the 6th, who could play whether it's inside or outside. And that provides a measure of versatility, which I asked him, what does that do for you as a play caller? He talked about some of the things that does for him and what it could do in terms of providing different looks to defenses, schematically, things of that nature. I expect this passing game to be really good. Going to go to Juan Davis here specifically at the tight end room. Chip, the more I thought about it, once I heard Juan Davis's name referenced, from Kyle Flood and Jeff Banks and Steve Sarkisian. Yeah, it feels to me like, let's just run it down. Gunnar Helm's probably going to be your inline tight end, right? Someone can play inline, block, has busted his behind athletically to be adequate enough that you got to respect in the pass game, right? Before you saw Gunnar Helm come in maybe 2 years ago, like, all right, that's like that guy you back off at the 3-point line. Like, he ain't taking the shot. He's not a threat, right? Now you got to respect Gunnar Helm as an athlete and as a target. Amari Niblack, you go back to his time in Alabama, I always keep wanting to say Charlie Weiss. It's not Charlie Weiss Jr., it's Tommy Reese's offense. Wrong Notre Dame connection there. And Tommy Reese's offense last year was used primarily as a guy in the slot for the most part. They weren't asking to do a ton of blocking. Juan Davis, athletically, he's always been there, right? This was a matter of him staying healthy and putting it all together. If Juan Davis can be that guy who almost kind of spells Amari Niblack in the slot, but also to what you said, Chip, him not being afraid to go knock someone on their behind and in the A gap. All right, now you've got kind of that player who I'm not calling Juan JT, but maybe he fits that kind of role, right? He's the athletic guy naturally who you can line up in the slot, but also is going to give you enough. And some Texas fans will probably say, JT left a little bit to be desired in the run blocking game. But if Juan Davis can give you that plus a little bit more, then yeah, there's room for all 3 of these guys just based on the different skill sets of what they kind of provide. So no, I do like what I'm hearing in that sense and kind of the expectation of what that could look like come week 1 and beyond.
Yeah, we'll give JT Sanders a little bit of a pass because of that ankle injury last year, but it was his man who sacked Quinn Ewers and caused that AC joint sprain. So yeah, the blocking is enormous. And if Juan Davis is passing all the tests in terms of the blocking, we know that kid can get loose down the field and has great hands. So I'm fascinated to watch Juan Davis work this year. I hope he gets a lot of opportunity. I hope he seizes that opportunity because I do think Steve Sarkisian, we know he loves the 2 tight end set. And if he feels like he's got weapons in Juan Davis and Amari Niblack, that certainly helps because we know Gunnar Helm can. I wanted them to throw the drag route to Gunnar Helm in the Washington game. I felt like, they're not going to look for that here. Everybody's keyed in on A.D. Mitchell. He's the red zone target. But anyway, let's move on. The special teams in the scrimmage, Bert Auburn money, punters are a work in progress. We've mentioned probably Charlie Ferris right now is your leader. Michael Kern, good hang time from Michael Kern, just needs to get the distance. Right now, Charlie Ferris probably has the hang time and the distance. And it looks like it's a two-man race right now. Ian Ratliff kind of falling behind in that race. But Eric, you ready for some take it or leave it?
Chip, I am ready for some take it or leave it, but I got to run a question by you before we get there. If you don't mind, I call a little bit of an audible here. We are doing our Horns247 Ask Me Anything chats, and I asked you this question, but I'd love to give it here to our flagship audience. Chip, can you run down just some of the best performances by an opposing player facing Texas? And I think in the on the board, and that's why you got to be on the boards. 30% off. Sign up now. You get this type of content. But on the boards, I think I asked you football, men's basketball, women's basketball, whatever direction you want to take. If there's one that maybe came to mind that you didn't have in the moment, would love to get that here for our flagship audience.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was a really good question. I kind of had fun with it. So thank you for the question. I think you said you were a first-time caller, long-time listener when you asked your question, and you did include Michael Penix. Where does Michael Penix rank in that? And so I started with Ndamukong Suh, who had 12 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, and 4.5 sacks. That's a season for some. Ndamukong Suh tormented Colt McCoy in the Big 12 title game. I still don't know how Texas won that game. I mean, it was like they got a penalty and a pass to Jordan Shipley, and that got him close enough for Hunter Lawrence to kick a 47-yard field goal, and Texas won that game 12-10. I mean, it was. I mean, I don't know how long it took Colt McCoy to get over that game, but anyway, Ndamukong Suh and Jared Crick actually had their way. And then, Michael Penix is right up there. Rashaan Salaam running for 317 yards against Texas in 94. It basically ignited his Heisman Trophy campaign. And then Taysom Hill, quarterback at BYU, ran for 259 yards in 2013 out in Provo. Manny Diaz, the defensive coordinator, was fired the next day. That's how bad that was. And so those are, those were probably the top in football from the opponent against Texas. And then in basketball, obviously JJ Redick lit up Texas for 41. It was a blowout in East Rutherford, New Jersey, on December 10th, 2005. That was a terrible day for Texas because later that night, Vince Young did not win the Heisman, and he should have. But the other favorite that just immediately pops to mind is AC Law from A&M, 33 points. Kevin Durant had 30. Texas won over A&M in double overtime, but AC Law hit big shots to force both overtimes, and it was impressive. He did not back off 1 second. If you ask Kevin Durant about that game, he'll be like, oh, AC Law was out of this world. And AC Law had some big games for A&M under Billy Gillispie at the time against Kansas as well. They went up to Fog Allen Fieldhouse and became the first Big 12 team to win there. And then women's basketball, Cheryl Swoops in 93. Cheryl Swoops, she was the best I've ever seen. What she scored, 47 in the national championship game for Texas Tech. It was ridiculous. So I appreciate that question, Eric. That was fun to kind of go down that rabbit hole. All right. Hey, kids, guess what? It's time for some take it or leave it. So let's do it. If you're watching us on the Horns247 YouTube channel, we will roll on. All right, Eric Henry of Tampa Catholic High School. Let's get into some take it or leave it. Jaden Blue and Trey Wisner can no longer take part in contact drills at practice. Take it or leave it.
Chip, I typically wouldn't be this drastic, but I'm taking it. I don't think you can afford to go down to 2 scholarship backs. No matter how great we feel about Colin Page, I don't think you can afford to lose another one. Now, contact is a little bit tricky, right? I don't mind going thud tempo, but it is on you. If my running back touches the ground, there will be hell to pay, right? So contact is tricky. I don't mind going a little thud tempo to get, something going, but I would make it very clear to defensive players, this is a team. You want to help your team out, you keep my running back off the ground.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on this. I remember Ricky Williams. Mac Brown would not let the defense tackle Ricky Williams. Ricky Williams wanted to have those physical practices, but Mac Brown was like, no way. So thud tempo, I agree. Everybody show that they're in the right gap, running through the right gap, defending the right gap, but we're not tackling to the ground with Jaden Blue and Trey Wisner anymore in 2024. All right, take it or leave it. Number 2.
Take it or leave it. Number 2, Texas fans should be elated that the defense dominated the headlines coming out of the first fall camp scrimmage. Take it or leave it, Chip Brown.
Yeah, I think I'll take this. Elated might be a little strong, but they should not be mad. Some fans are like, what? Our offense is unbeatable. It's going to be amazing. Okay. Well, it probably will be, but it's also good to hear that the defense is doing something, because everybody's been concerned about, oh my God, there's no Tavondre Sweat, no Byron Murphy. Is there going to be any run defense? Okay, well, there was some run defense. There was some pressure on the quarterback. There were some passes batted. There were some fumbles caused. There were some interceptions. My gut instinct is scrimmage number 2 this Saturday will probably be a good day for the offense. These things tend to swing because they get tired of hearing about it from their position coaches all week. So, yeah, I'll take this. Eric, how about you?
I am going to take it, like you said, elated, maybe a little strong, but obviously you don't want to be. And I know I said what I said earlier in the podcast. I don't want to just throw a wet blanket completely over the performance, but you should be happy, right? Because it was some of the names we're hearing at some of the spots we're hearing. We talked about it. Interior defensive line, Andrew Makuba making plays, Jade Barron making plays, Leon Galafau showing that gradual, steady level of growth as a linebacker. So yeah, I'll take it.
Okay. All right. Eric, take it or leave it. Number 3, with Michigan charging $12.25 for a domestic beer at the Big House, Texas fans are getting a steal at DKR, paying only $8 for a domestic beer for the 3rd year in a row. Take it or leave it, Eric.
I am taking it. When I saw this question come through, part of me just harken back to my group of 5 days when you could get a domestic beer for $4, but I understand it's a different place.
Where was that? At the 7-Eleven?
Conference USA, my friend. Conference USA.
At the Bounce House? At the Bright House Networks?
No, believe it or not, Chip, the Bounce House at Bright House, for a while, you couldn't get alcohol in there. Initially you could, then there was some back and forth. And then now you can get alcohol in there. Students, still a little tricky. Nevertheless, you can smuggle it in, but that's a different podcast. We're not going to advocate for that. No, for Texas fans, listen, I do think you should be happy. As I said, and I'm being serious. I know I may have said it in jest in the earlier part of the episode. Double digits for a domestic beer? Come on, what are we doing? Like, this is there's more than enough money being made at games. Chip, can put you this way. I won't specify what. They have more than enough ways that is are making money on game days. And Chip knows what I'm referring to. Our little carpool. That I think they can back off on their 12.25.
Yeah, no, we can just say it.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, I don't think they're going to pull our credential. We've already been approved for credentials to Michigan, but they're charging $80 for media parking. Like the days of the media coming to cover your team and being grateful, and they probably won't even have a meal up in that press box, Eric, because by God, we're the big house. You bring your own damn food or whatever. I don't know. I won't be petty. But anyway, yeah, that's what Eric was talking about. $80. That's like Jerry Jones parking for the Cowboys.
And season parking if you cover that team on the regular too. Right? Like the satellite trucks, Chip. Hey, get in line, pay with everybody else. So yeah, I think Texas fans should be happy in Michigan. They have more enough ways to make a dollar, Chip. But what about
and you? I'll say this, Eric, because people see that Michigan poster. My parents were season ticket holders at Michigan. So I grew up going to the big house. My mom used to joke that it was the only time my dad was ever on time to go anywhere was to start the tailgate at Michigan football games. So you'll see when you get to Ann Arbor, the Michigan golf course is right across the street from the big house and Chrysler Arena, the basketball arena. They park cars on the golf course and they charge. I remember when I was a kid, my first game going to Michigan was 1975. It was Michigan versus Baylor of all teams, and it was a 15-15 tie.
Oh, wow.
But I remember the golf course, it cost $20 to park a car on the golf course. Eric, I have to think that's going to be $80 or $100 by the time we roll in there September 7th.
Chip, I won't make this, and we'll close him in a second, but again, it is so foreign to my sensibilities. You're talking to me who went to a handful of games at the old Orange Bowl, Chip. And did you ever cover a game at the old Orange Bowl? Orange Bowl?
No, I've never been to the Orange Bowl.
Oh man, I'm
not happy about it.
Oh man, Chip, there would be plenty of charged parking, and then you'd have the folks there in Little Havana Cayocho would say, "Hey, come here. You need $5 parking, $10 parking. I got a spot right here." And it might not look like the best spot in the world, but guess what? Your car was safe with them because that was big business for them. They couldn't let something happen to a car because that was year-round business. I guess I'm spoiled on that, where it's like you got the neighborhood guy and hey, you're good. It might be a little hairy, walking back at night, but your car is safe because he is there, he or she or that family are there watching it with their lives.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, kids, you should be happy. You're only paying $8 for a domestic beer. Kudos to Cristel Conte, Drew Martin. They've taken the approach that if you've moved, heaven and earth to get to the game, gas, driven in, maybe a hotel, that you shouldn't get gouged once you get to the game. So kudos. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Flagship podcast. As Eric said, make sure that you head over to horns247.com, become an annual member. You saw the little scroll, 30% off. And by becoming an annual member, this is why this is important. You get VIP access to all the team sites on the preeminent 24/7 Sports Network. So you can go check up on what Michigan's doing in their fall camp, and Georgia and Alabama and all the teams in the SEC, even UTSA, for crying out loud. All right. For Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. Till next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe. to the Horns247 YouTube channel. Feel free to give us a great review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Our bosses will really appreciate that. Stay safe and keep the faith.